Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the MMA Corners Weekly News Wrap-Up. I am Jason Schilke, filling in for Josh Davis this week, who's feeling a little underneath the weather. And as always, we are joined by our staff writers, Trey Downey and Eric Reinhardt. How you guys doing this afternoon?
Pretty great, Jason.
I'm good.
Good deal, guys. Well, we have actually quite a bit to talk about this week. Even though there wasn't an MMA event, there was still a lot of stuff that went on this week. So let's get right to it. It was announced that Cain Velasquez and Fabricio Verdum is going to headline UFC 180 that's going to go down in Mexico in November. Now, we all know that Verdum has been on a resurgence of late, and he has looked the best he has looked in his career so far. Nobody can, not say that. But does he honestly have a chance to beat Cain Velasquez? Eric, why don't you start us off, buddy?
Sure. Well, up until his dismantling of Travis Brown a few weeks ago, I would have said no chance in hell. Cain Velasquez, with one notable exception, of course, against Junior Dos Santos on that first UFC on Fox card, has looked absolutely unstoppable. His striking is powerful, it is technical, it is accurate. He's obviously got the Division I All-American caliber wrestling to defend against any kind of ground attack that most fighters are going to bring him. But Fabricio Verdum has continued to overachieve, especially in these later stages of his career. He's on a 4-fight winning streak right now, and again, he made Travis Brown, someone who prior to the fight against Verdum looked absolutely unstoppable. He made him look just like an average heavyweight. So I'm very much looking forward to this fight. I think it's a great debut for the UFC in Mexico City. I mean, what better fighter to feature than, number one, the heavyweight champion, but also, number two, a guy with brown pride tattooed really big across his chest. So I think this is going to be a more competitive fight than most people would have thought before Verdum's victory over Travis Brown. That being said, I do think Velasquez is going to retain the title. I do think he is going to stop Verdum, but it is going to be a closer fight than many people think.
You bring up a great point. A lot of people really didn't give Verdum much of a chance against Travis Brown. They were kind of already crowning Brown as, the next person to take on Cain Velasquez to challenge for the title. And what he did in that fight was, nothing short of amazing. And we still don't know if it's a case of, in my mind, if Verdum is really that good or if Brown was just overhyped. Trey, what's your thoughts on it, my man?
When it comes to that Verdum and Brown fight, I think it's not necessarily either of the two things. I don't think Brown was overhyped. I think eventually down the road he will be fighting for the UFC heavyweight title. But Fabricio Verdum is really that good right now. I think a lot of the thing going into that fight was Verdum hadn't fought since that submission victory against Big Nog last June, I believe. So it was well over 6 months since his last time fighting. And Brown was on the biggest tear of his career, just knocking people out left and right, big names. So I think it was more of a what have you done for me lately kind of thing that people just hadn't seen Verdum. As far as this fight goes with Velasquez, I think it's a very, very interesting matchup because Cain Velasquez has never really faced someone who has that type of submission game on the ground and went to the ground with them. He did face Big Nog as well, but they were on the feet the whole time. And Verdum's striking is clearly improving. He's looked great ever since he came back to the UFC, and his ground game is second to none in the UFC heavyweight division. So I think it's going to be a very interesting fight. It's the perfect fight to go to Mexico. Dana White said they wouldn't go to Mexico without Cain, and it also makes perfect sense because Fabricio Verdum is fluent in Spanish and is featured all over the UFC Spanish language broadcasts. So it's a perfect thing, and it's a big blockbuster fight for later this year.
Yeah, it really is, and plus with the fight being in Mexico and with Verdum being from Brazil, it's not out of the realm of possibility that he's also going to draw a lot of people from Brazil up to Mexico. So, I mean, the potential for this fight to be extremely huge selling out a soccer stadium, I think is really there. I mean, I think it's going to be a great fight. I personally can't wait to see it. 5 seconds or less. Predictions, Eric.
Sorry, I was muted. Velasquez by TKO.
All right, Trey.
Velasquez.
Okay, Velasquez all the way around. So, okay, so next up, John Fitch and Jake Shields. They're going to be the co-main event at World Series of Fighting 11. Now, we both know that, or we all know, that neither of these guys are really known for their excitement when they fight. They're both kind of grinders. They go out there, they try to impose their will on the ground. What do you think that this has any chance of being a fight that's going to attract more eyeballs to the World Series of Fighting aside from name draw?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think necessarily that, people are going to go into that fight other than the name draw. The name draw is going to be what gets people in. These are two guys who, still have the potential, still could possibly, be top 15 welterweights in the world. They both went a lot of people lately went 5 full rounds with George St. Pierre, but both of those guys put up a hell of a fight against GSP. And sometimes and those were two of the more exciting fights that GSP had. And everybody considers, GSP a grinder, somebody that, doesn't get a finish and that his fights are somewhat boring. But those two guys that had similar styles made for some pretty good fights with GSP, and I think that's exactly what could happen here. The control that these two guys can get on the ground could possibly neutralize each other. So we could see a matchup on the feet. Neither of these guys are absolutely slouches when it comes to the striking game. So I think it's a very interesting matchup. We'll see who could get the better of that ground game. It's going to be interesting for all the grappling fans out there, but it could be a very exciting fight. I'm excited to see it, especially since the rumors are that it could be down here in my neck of the woods.
Yeah, I agree with Trey. I'm a guy who really appreciates highly technical fights, and while this does potentially have could be a snoozer of a fight, in that both John Fitch and Jake Shields have been known for their kind of control-based offense, let's call it. Both of them are also elite-level grapplers. And so if this does go to the ground, we could see one of the best grappling-based MMA fights that we've ever seen, certainly in the last few years. Now, that being said, if this fight was in 2009, I think everybody would be really excited about it. Unfortunately, Father Time has its way of doing things to professional athletes. Jake Shields is 35, Fitch is 36. Neither of them have looked, particularly world-beating in the near recent past. But that being said, both of them do have a certain amount of draw. They have been elite fighters in the welterweight division within the last few years. And again, I think if the potential that this fight has to be the grappling contest that it could be comes to fruition, it could be one of the better fights that the World Series of Fighting sees.
You do bring up a good point, because both these guys at one point in time were, thought of to be the best, the second best next to St. Pierre at welterweight in the UFC. But my only concern is the styles. Yeah, they're both, they're both wrestlers, Fitch is a wrestler, Shields, of course, American Jiu-Jitsu. They both shown that they do have some, decent striking prowess, but, I'm still not sold. I think this fight's going to be a snuggle fest. I don't think it's going to be aesthetically pleasing. And I say snuggle fest because I can't say what I want to say. But you do bring up a good point. It's one of the best fights that the World Series of Fighting can put on to showcase the 170-pound division and to continue, basically showcasing their talent roster, which, in addition to that, it's also announced that Melvin Gillard's going to be making his debut with the promotion against Jay-Z Calvin Kente, which, if fans haven't been following him, if you missed his fights over in Dream, they were something to behold. He was an absolute animal over there. He had some great fights. What are your guys' initial thoughts on this fight?
You know, I'm excited about it as well. You know, this whole card that World Series of Fighting is putting on is you know, probably, well, not probably, it is undoubtedly the best card that they've put on in their promotional history. You know, at the top of the bill, you've got Justin Gaethje and Nick Newell. Nick Newell is must-see TV, and Justin Gaethje is one of the best lightweight prospects in the world. You've got Shields and Fitch in the co-main, and then you've got Gillard and Jay-Z, which are names that people know. It's going to be a great card. You know, you could possibly see another title challenger come out of that Gillard and Jay-Z fight for the winner of the Gaethje and Newell fight. You know, that fight's taking place on the cards on July 5th. It's going to be a great matinee, you know, because to get us ready for UFC 175 with Chris Weidman, Ronda Rousey, all those fighters fighting that night. It's going to be a great day, great weekend for MMA, and I'm excited for it.
I think the World Series of Fighting certainly benefits from using these ex-UFC fighters at the top of their bill just as much as the ex-UFC fighters benefit from the World Series of Fighting keeping them in their employ. Obviously, as Trey said, this is going to draw a lot of eyes because it's, you know, sort of the big MMA weekend of the summer. So, you know, if Jake Shields is really successful over John Fitch, or perhaps if John Fitch is really successful over Jake Shields, one could see perhaps a brighter future late in their careers for either of those fighters. The same could be said for Jay-Z and for Melvin Gillard. You know, Melvin Gillard certainly is a fighter who is known to bring the excitement, and, you know, despite the fact that he is no longer in the UFC's or on the UFC's roster, Dana White and his fellow UFC executives have made no secret of the fact that they like the kind of fighter that Melvin Gillard is. So, you know, if he's able to string together a win over Jay-Z, someone who is obviously very highly regarded in his division, and maybe one or two other fights in the World Series of Fighting, Melvin Gillard could see a late career resurgence as a UFC contender.
You know, I completely agree with you on that part. My biggest concern with Melvin Gillard's always been his mental state. It's like you can tell whenever he's in a fight whether he actually wants to be there or if he's just, you know, kind of on cruise control. So, I mean, I'm really excited for that fight. I'm actually more excited for that fight than Shields versus Fitch. But the fight, I think, will depend on which Gillard shows up. But I mean, I personally think it's going to be a really exciting fight. I've always been a fan of Gillard. Jay-Z, of course. I mean, he's an action fighter. So, I mean, and like Trey said, you know, putting this on right before 175, there's going to be a lot of eyeballs, especially with all the ex-UFC stars on this fight card. So, it's going to be a great weekend of fights. Can't wait for it. So, moving right along. In other news, which I am really excited about this one, Donald Cerrone and Jim Miller going to be headlining UFC Fight Night 45 in Atlantic City. Now, do you think that the winner of this fight is going to get the next shot at Anthony Pettis?
Well, first of all, I mean, because we're talking about Atlantic City, I want to give a quick shout-out to the show Boardwalk Empire. I just binged on the 4 seasons of this program probably over the last month and a half, and I have not liked a program this much since The Wire, which is like my all-time favorite show. So Boardwalk Empire, Atlantic City, 1920s Prohibition era, Steve Buscemi. Check it out. As far as this fight goes, this is one of the more exciting fights that I think the UFC could put together. Jim Miller and Donald Cerrone are both known as fight finishers. They're guys who go in and they don't look for the decision, they look for the kill. They've demonstrated that repeatedly in their careers. I think their careers have kind of taken a similar trajectory in that they've had, you know, a number of high-caliber wins followed by a kind of contention-closing loss. Both of them have lost to Nick Diaz. Jim Miller was dominated, oddly, by Pat Healy in a fight that ultimately ended up being a no contest. But both Donald Cerrone and Jim Miller have strung together a few wins and have put themselves back in contention. So, you know, whether the winner of this fight deserves an immediate title shot, I don't think that's the case. But, you know, I think there are a few other scenarios that the winner of this fight could find himself in. It's certainly a title eliminator, but I feel like the winner of this fight could take on a Khabib Nurmagomedov, pardon me, who is still looking for an opponent right now, I believe, as well as the winner of the Ben Henderson-Rustam Khabilov fight. I think that's kind of the big group of 5 lightweights that are contending for the title right now, and the winner of Cerrone and Miller should face one of those 3 others.
You know, the winner of this fight could be in contention for a title, but the lightweight title fight that's happening next isn't happening till the end of the year. Donald Cerrone, this will be his 3rd fight in 2014. He's stated publicly that he wants to fight 6 times this year. I don't know if he'll get to 6. 5 is certainly a possibility. If you win 5 fights in a year in a row, he could definitely be in line for a title shot by the time that title fight rolls around. And I'm just really excited that this fight is happening. These are, 2 stalwarts of the UFC lightweight division that you just, you wanted to see these 2 guys step into the cage with each other before their careers are over. And I'm actually glad that the roadblocks to get this to happen are happening. It said that this fight with Cerrone was offered to Nate Diaz for him to come back for this to be the main event of their for a rematch of their fight at UFC 141. Nate never returned the UFC's calls, so that wasn't happening, and they were going to match up Jim Miller with Khabib Nurmagomedov, but he's a Muslim, and they have a holiday over the summer where he's going to be fasting, so he couldn't take a fight at this time. It's going to be a great fight, and it's a perfect fight for a main event for a Fox Sports 1 show. Both of these guys have been on Big Fox, have name notoriety, and I'm so glad that it's the main event because this fight could go 5 full rounds and has a potential to, when we look back at the end of 2014, we could be looking at a fight of the year between Donald Cerrone and Jim Miller.
Absolutely. I'm in agreement with you on that one. It wasn't too long ago that the general consensus was that Donald Cerrone was kind of going to be the gatekeeper of the lightweight division. It was sort of, if you want to fight for the title, you got to get through Donald Cerrone. But now, Cerrone, he's strung off wins against Evan Dunham, and then he just completely wrecked Edson Barboza, who people were really big on. And, he's won 4 out of his last 5, and they've all been against good opponents. KJ Noons, throw his name in the mix. And then Jim Miller, ever since he's been in the UFC, he's been, right there on the cusp, and he has, I think that this is going to be a great fight. I don't believe it's going to have immediate title shot implications, if I said that correctly. But I do think that the winner of this fight is definitely going to set themselves up down the road for a shot at the title, possibly sometime in 2015. So, next up, Conor McGregor will headline the UFC's trip to Dublin against Cole Miller. Is this fight really headline worthy?
Absolutely, because it's in Dublin, Ireland. I think if it was any other location besides Ireland, Conor McGregor is at best a co-main event attraction at this point. Yes, he's won a couple of UFC fights in a row. Yes, he's looked very impressive. And yes, he has the sort of Chael Sonnen, Ric Flair sort of quality that draws the cameras his way. So I think that he, certainly a rising star in the UFC, but not a headline attraction anywhere except for Ireland. Fortunately, this fight is in Ireland. Obviously, Cole Miller represents a pretty significant challenge for Conor McGregor, and I think if he gets through Cole Miller, he will be able to sort of back up the considerable talk that he has put forth, in his greatness, and certainly be in consideration for a title shot. But that being said, it's not going to be an easy task to get through Cole Miller. Yes, Conor McGregor has not lost in quite some time, but both of his professional losses have been by submission. And Cole Miller has 15 professional victories by submission. In fact, one would probably call him a submission-based fighter, even though he has displayed a pretty well-rounded game throughout his career. So I think it's a great way to attract people in Ireland to the live event because obviously, one of the few Irish fighters in the UFC is going to be a big attraction over in his home country. So I think it's a great headlining event for the Irish show, but anywhere else I think it would be a co-main event at best.
I think you nailed it right on the head there. For Ireland, this is a huge main event. You know that there's going to be tons of people there backing up McGregor, especially making his return after his knee injury. But the question, one question I would want to bring up, which I'm sure Trey will address here, McGregor's been out with a knee injury, and like Eric stated, Cole Miller is a beast on the ground. He's a submission wizard. I mean, he is great on the ground. And you know, is Cole Miller the right fight for Conor McGregor to come back after having such a long layoff, especially with a knee injury, to fight a grappler and a submission expert in Cole Miller?
It's the perfect fight for him to come back to. If you look at the other guys who have called him out in the featherweight division, Clay Guida amongst others, he's pretty much becoming the Michael Bisping of the featherweight division. Everybody wants to fight this guy just because they knew that he was going to get this headlining spot in Dublin, Ireland. And as far as this being a headlining fight, let's put it this way: if James Tahuna and Nate Marquardt is a main event, then Conor McGregor and Cole Miller can be a main event. In Ireland, Conor McGregor is a huge star. Their big, late night program over there, like the Tonight Show in Ireland, Conor McGregor has been featured on that show numerous times. He's a huge star over there. It's a big deal for Ireland. Ireland is one of the markets that have been clamoring to get a UFC fight back on their soil in years. Conor McGregor is a fast rising star. I don't necessarily, think that the UFC's might end up rushing him into a title shot, because I think he gets smashed by the likes of Jose Aldo or Chad Mendes for that matter. But Cole Miller has been on a good run of late. But let's face it, Cole Miller is not a top 5 guy in the featherweight division. He's a top 15, reaching the edge of the top 10 type of guy. This is the fight to determine for Conor McGregor to, is he going to get over that hump and then get into the top 10 and fight the contenders. It's a fight that, honestly, I think he should win, and that's what the UFC wants to send the fans in Ireland home happy. And Cole Miller's been talking trash about him for forever, so the lead up to this fight's going to be great. It's on Fight Pass, so, they're not going to have to worry about, necessarily clamoring for views, but a lot of people want to see Conor McGregor. It's the perfect fight for him to come back to, and yes, it's a headliner.
Now, I am going to disagree with you on that one, but I think it's a headliner for a card in Ireland. I think it's a great headliner for a card in Ireland, because that he's going to draw, he's going to pack wherever they're going to have this fight. But in America, if this fight was being held over here, this would be, prelim card or preliminary fight. Well, I don't want to say preliminary fight. Maybe that's a little harsh. It's not. It wouldn't be main event status. Can we agree on that?
I mean, maybe if it was on a Fox Sports 1 card, I think it could be co-main event, possibly a main event fight. I'm really excited about Matt Brown and Eric Silva, but I mean, this fight will probably be. Conor McGregor is probably a bigger name than even Matt Brown at this stage. People want to see the guy fight. They want to see him get beat up.
I think Conor McGregor has established himself as enough of an attraction, again in a similar way that Chael Sonnen has, to warrant a little bit more attention than your average UFC fighter. I think that there's no way this fight ends up on a preliminary card. I think even on a pay-per-view, this is going to be on the main card, if only like the first of the 5 pay-per-view fights.
Okay, there you have it. My opinion is a little bit different, but then again, I'm an equal opportunity hater. So, now really quick before we move on to our topics of the week, I do want to briefly touch on the fights from last night. There was even though there was no MMA, we had a great night of fights. We had Glory 16 in Denver. We had, of course, the big fight between Floyd Mayweather and Carlos Maidana that ended up being a lot closer than I think anybody expected. If you happen to catch our Twitter feed at the MMA Corner, or if you watched it at your local sports bar or the pay-per-view, you were treated to a really, really good fight. When I was watching it, I can honestly say that was the most competitive fight that Mayweather's been in since his first fight against Julio Luis Castillo, that a majority of boxing analysts believe that he lost, including myself. I thought that he lost that fight 9 rounds to 3 in their first fight. Obviously, he came back, dominated the second fight against Castillo, but over the past 10 years, Mayweather's just been steamrolling people, and he's turned into the boxer that people want to pay money to see him get beat up. And we just about had that last night, and against a fighter that, a lot of people didn't think he had any chance of beating. A lot of people thought that Maidana just, he won the Mayweather sweepstakes. He was going to get a big check. But he ended up coming in and taking the fight to Mayweather, and was the first person in over a decade to make Floyd Mayweather look human. Now, it looks like there's already going to be a rematch in September. Obviously, it's going to be a big sell because it was such a good fight. But do you think that I know Trey wants to chime in on, both of you guys want to chime in on this. Do you think that Maidana actually has the tools to beat Mayweather, or do you think that Mayweather was just slow starting, or at 37 years of age, is that starting to catch up with Mayweather?
I don't necessarily think that Floyd's age is catching up to him. I think a lot of people underestimated Marcos Maidana coming into this fight. Marcos Maidana, I think, was clearly the guy who deserved the shot at Floyd Mayweather and the big payday. Maidana's last fight against Adrian Broner, who a lot of people, wanted to anoint as the next Floyd. A lot of people still think he's overrated, but Maidana pretty much smashed him. So I think that this was the perfect opponent for Mayweather. I think Floyd would have smashed Amir Khan if that would have been the fight. So I'm glad Maidana got it, and I'm excited to see a rematch. People will pay to see this because he's the guy that made Floyd vulnerable, and that's the selling point of a Floyd Mayweather fight. A lot of people thought Canelo was going to be able to do it, but he couldn't. Marcos Maidana is a very unorthodox boxer, something that Floyd really hasn't. He hasn't faced someone that unorthodox, and he's a big power puncher. So a lot of people are going to be tuning in September if this rematch happens. And Maidana, I don't want to really necessarily compare the two because of the different stages in their careers, but Maidana could be to Floyd Mayweather what Alexander Gustafsson is to John Jones right now.
I'm only what you would call a very casual boxing fan. I was into boxing a little bit before I got into MMA. I watched some of Kelly Pavlik's fights from the latter part of the last decade and got a little bit into boxing as a result of that. But really, as a casual fan, and I say that using that term extremely loosely, there's really only one fight Floyd Mayweather can put together that's going to attract the most viewers, and that's Floyd Mayweather versus Manny Pacquiao. I know this has been said a bazillion times, and I'm probably behind the times in saying that, but that's the view of the casual boxing fan, and I don't think any other Floyd Mayweather fight is going to draw as much attention as that one would, as irrelevant as it might be at this point.
Of course, the casual boxing fan, they're still going to shell out. They would shell out tons and tons of money, and it would be a $2 million pay-per-view buy if Pacquiao and Mayweather were to ever square off. But it already looks like the rematch is going to happen between Maidana and Mayweather in September. As far as Amir Khan goes, I think that he would land about 3 punches through 7 rounds before Mayweather just quit toying with him and got him out of there. I've never been impressed by Amir Khan. I don't think he's anywhere near Floyd's level. I don't think he could beat Floyd on his worst day. But anyway, enough about boxing. Before we start to wrap things up, I know that we have our topic of the week that everybody gets a minute to discuss any topic in sports that you want to talk about. So let's get that ball rolling.
Well, this week, obviously, one of the big sports topics, unfortunately, has been Donald Sterling and his dalliances with horrible speech that got caught on tape and put into public, and now he's facing the consequences of that. I think that this incident serves as a reminder that aside from, people have been talking about how, yes, explicit racism is bad, but what about institutional racism? And I'm not going to get into all of that because this isn't a sociology class, but, I think this Donald Sterling incident is a reminder that, putting aside the institutional racism that people have talked about in the wake of this incident, people still say some pretty racist stuff when they think they are in private. So, it's a stark reminder that that is still present here in America, even as many would claim we are in a post-racial world. Speaking specifically to sports, the UFC has responded very strongly to past displays of overt racism, cutting fighters and ending sponsorship agreements with companies that even have the sort of stench of possible ties to white supremacist organizations. So, they've played it pretty safe when it comes to this specific topic. Now, that being said, UFC President Dana White, who I think most would argue more than any other athlete in the UFC is the face of the company, has said some fairly controversial things, not necessarily about race, but about LGBT issues, using some slurs in certain ways. So I hope that this incident serves as a reminder not only to him, but for everybody in the MMA community to kind of mind their P's and Q's, even when they think they're in private, because we live in a society today where pretty much anything can be recorded and put out into the public, as we're now seeing with Donald Sterling. So I think even in private, and this isn't to insinuate that these people are using these terms, but it is a reminder that we live in an extremely public world, even in private. And the UFC is the kind of company now that has expanded beyond just sort of a niche sport. It is getting some coverage by the national networks. So further controversial statements by Dana White or by anybody who is largely associated with the UFC are going to get a lot more attention than they would have 5 or 10 years ago. But here's the bottom line. Beyond everything else, black, white, liberal, conservative, man, woman, old, young, there's really two kinds of people in the world. There's a-holes and there's not a-holes. So get your mind right and don't be an a-hole.
My topic of the week, I dug a little bit deeper and I found a MMA news story that some fans might not necessarily know about. This June in Tulsa, Oklahoma, there's going to be a debut fight card from a promotion, Battlegrounds MMA, headed up by Kenny Monday, former Olympic wrestler, coach down at the Black Zillions in Florida, and they're putting on a one-night tournament card. They're calling it ONE. Tournaments are what got MMA its start. It's what got it on. Put the name of the sport on the map. UFC 1, all the early UFCs were tournaments. Everybody looked forward to that. Does it still have a place in MMA? I'm not sure. The Oklahoma Commission has already, went ahead. They've licensed the fights. It's going to go down. There's interesting names in this. The two most infamous wardrobe people in the history of the UFC are fighting in this tournament. Cody McKenzie with the tag on the shorts and Dennis Hallman with his Speedos are both taking part in this 8-man, 170-pound tournament. Is this, something that's going to be a lasting thing as far as a promotion goes in MMA? Probably not. But if you get the right names and the right division, put on something like this a couple times a year, it might end up being a train wreck. And with the names involved, it could be. But I'm probably going to tune in on June 27th to see who comes out on top.
Yeah, if you remember the last one-night tournament that was held by Shine Fights, I believe it was in Oklahoma as well. It kind of was a train wreck as well. So let's hope that this one-night tournament ends up a little bit better. But my topic for this week is Pat Barry. Obviously, he has been an incredibly entertaining fighter in the UFC. And since he ended his UFC career, he made his debut last night in Glory and was knocked out cold in one round. And we're not talking, and we're talking like a scary-looking knockout. And this, every once in a while, a fighter's going to get knocked out. It looks scary. But in Pat Barry's case, it's been a pretty common occurrence in his career. And I am one that is very pro. How do I put this delicately? Um, I believe that commissions need to pay closer attention to what the amount of punishment fighters are taking. And Pat Barry has suffered some horrendous knockout losses over the past couple of years. And I truly think it's time for people that are close with him to really, have that talk with him to get him out of combat sports. I mean, there's a ton of things he could be doing. He could be training. I mean, he has a great personality. He could be doing commentating for some different shows. I mean, there's a plethora of different career paths outside of combat sports for Pat Barry. I just hope that either A, the commission step in and won't refuse to license him, or B, the people that are close with him sit down and convince him that he no longer needs to do this, or C, he comes to the self-realization that, hey, for my longevity, for my own life, for my friends, for my family, I need to take a step back and pursue other options. So, and with that being said, that will do it for this week's edition of the MMA Corners Weekly News Wrap-Up. I'd like to thank Eric and Trey for joining us this week. And once again, I'm Jason Schilke, filling in for Josh Davis and, I guess, Rob Tatum. And this week's episode brought to you by Battle Bomb, the only pain reliever with knockout power. Check them out, battlebomb.com. And audio brought to you by Soul Electronics, power, clarity, comfort, soulelectronics.com. Go check them out. So until next week, keep on living the MMA Corner lifestyle.